Now that we've covered the basics of using Ableton to sequence our cues, we need to be able to transfer it from a 2D image, which we experienced through stereo playback, to a 3D image, which is over a multi-channel theater playback system. First, we must configure the outputs in the Ableton preferences. Under the Audio tab, we should ensure that our drive type is set to Core Audio. Next, let's direct our attention to the Output Device menu. Here, I have a multitude of output devices which I can select. Of particular interest to me are the two peripheral FireWire sound cards I've plugged into my computer. They are the Edirol FA101 and the PreSonus Fire Studio. For now, let's concentrate on the PreSonus Fire Studio. Next, we'll need to configure the outputs of the Fire Studio for availability in Ableton's channel strips. To do this, click on the Output Config button. In the Output Config window, you'll notice we have two columns of outputs. The first column gives you the ability to use the outputs as mono. The second column gives you the ability to use the outputs as stereo. You'll also notice that the Fire Studio offers access to up to 26 outputs. The ability to use all 26 outputs of the sound card relies on extra optical DACs, which I currently do not have. The Fire Studio itself only has 8 1/4-inch balanced analog outputs. Therefore, I will only enable these 8 outputs. For now, I'm going to enable both the mono and stereo buttons for these outputs. And then press OK to exit. To access the outputs we configured within Ableton, we must show the In-Out section. Here, we can view both input and output routing within Ableton. For now, we'll concentrate on the output. Each channel strip has the ability to route to the external output we configured in the preferences, to another channel strip in your set, or, as we prefer to use in theater, sends only. I can quickly route all 10 of my tracks to sends only by selecting all 10 of the track's headers, then selecting under the Audio 2 label, Sends Only. I've set up 4 return tracks for my outputs. A is my proscenium left and right. B is my house rear left and right. C is my upstage left and right. And D is an onstage practical speaker. Sends A, B, and C are all stereo outputs. Send D will be a mono output. To route the return tracks, I will select all 4 track headers and then choose my external output, which in our case is the PreSonus we configured earlier. The second drop menu will populate with all the outputs associated with the PreSonus. For return track A, our proscenium left and right outputs, I've chosen to use outputs 1 and 2. So I'll select the 1/2 stereo option. For return track B, our house rear left and right outputs, I've chosen to use outputs 3 and 4. So I'll select the 3/4 stereo option. For return track C, our upstage left and right outputs, I've chosen to use outputs 5 and 6. So I'll select the 5/6 stereo option. For return track D, our onstage practical, I've chosen to use output 7. So I'll select the 7 mono option. We are now configured to output audio over a multi-output system. Here we have a set with multiple cues in it. My outputs are also slightly different. I've scrapped the onstage practical speaker and thrown a stereo pair of speakers in the catwalk of the house, above the audience, called Catwalk. In my Q15, I will trigger 4 audio clips. In track 1, I have some transition music. It's a non-looping piece of music with some negative time inserted before it. Track 4 has some thunder. I've added a few warp markers to it to let the thunder cracks sit better with the timing of the transition music and the actor's entrance. I've also adjusted the clip volume envelope so we only hear the front end of it. Track 5 has rainfall, which I've set to loop. I've also done some EQ work on it, so it sounds like it's coming from outside the theater and hitting the roof. Track 6 is a copy of the thunder from track 4, but I've left the clip volume envelope on full so we can hear the whole thing. I've also set it to loop, so the thunder will play as long as we need it to. Lastly, I've rolled off the high end using some EQ for less proximity, adding distance. You'll also notice that I've narrowed the audio tracks so that Ableton Live displays the sends as a horizontal line. I prefer to work this way as I can see a number value of the send at a quick glance. Now, let's route it all. Let's put the transition music in track 1 out of the proscenium, house rear, and upstage. I'll send it at full to all 3. I know this won't be too loud, as the level of the clip itself, even with a 3 dB of clip gain, isn't very loud. I'm going to route track 4 to just the proscenium at -9.4 dB. I'll route the looped rainfall in track 5 to just the catwalk speakers at -25 dB. And lastly, I'll route the looped distant thunder in track 6 slightly to the proscenium at -51 dB and to the house rears at -47 dB. Remember, any of these send levels can be adjusted to taste. Let's have a listen. You can also automate an audio track sends by using envelopes within the clip. Here, I faded out the sends to A and B, or proscenium and house rears, and left the music on in only the upstage speakers, send C, to underscore an actor's monologue on stage.